Hey everyone, Jason here from Off the Beaten Path, and let me bring you the Off the Beaten Path Border Track Trip 2023. Epic trip, months in the planning, starting at the Border Cliffs campground, heading south, taking in some sights along the way, including the crater, camping at the Pines campground, the one-way section of the border track, camping at Red Bluff campground, finishing up at Piccaninny Ponds on the coast at the ocean, so the Murray to the ocean, right down the border, and then taking in some sights along the southern coast of Victoria, including a night camping in the Glenelg National Park, and finishing up at Air River Campground, and closing out the trip at the California Redwoods in the Otways. Epic trip, so much happens. So coming with us on this trip, of course, I'm coming on the trip. Always got to have that one guy that plays in the mud and makes things look hard. Got to be there. Also coming on the trip is Dan from Out There with Dan in the Iron Emu, his revamped 90 Series Prado. Coming along with us as well is Trippy Matt, pushing that 75 Series Trippy as hard as he possibly can. And making short work of the border track. Of course, no trip's complete without Luca, the Italian chef, pushing that TB48. And we also have Paul with us again, Mr. Control, bringing along his FJ Cruiser. So epic trip, can't wait to get into it.
Well, I didn't get to see much of camp last night, arriving in the dark. But here we are. Definitely worse places to wake up. Matt's already had a rod in. Right on the river. Good morning. Here we are, what a cracking spot. All right, let's get some coffee. So 76 is not finished, but at least we got the fridge installed and got ourselves a bit of a table.
So fortunately on this trip, Matt brought his drone along and was working most of the time, so he got some amazing footage of this campsite on the Murray River. Really shows it off really well. You can see right there's a good spot to sort of spread out so everybody could have some space, and good access road into this campground as well. And just to the east, which you'll see in some of these shots, there's a boat rental place. So that's the reason that there's a bunch of cars down there. And down towards there is a long drop toilet as well. So it's a bit of a walk from the campsites. There's a long shot. Murray's looking amazing. Vineyard there. And looking back towards Renmark in that direction. And you can see how big the Murray is down here, a long way from Albury, much bigger than it is up in our neck of the woods, and a lot of tributaries on the far side there as well. Just amazing country, and look, you don't really get to appreciate it like this without these drone shots, so it was awesome that Matt had his drone along. Coming back into camp, so Luca on the left there in the GU Patrol, then me, and then on the right hand side there Paul and Dan, and Matt's troopy at the back there in the white.
Well, I can confirm that the 12 volt dual battery system that I installed, the $300 dual battery system, worked as advertised, and the secondary battery was back up to just over 12 volts by the time I got to camp last night. So pretty happy with that. Yeah, so it's only got to last the trip. As I said, it should be fused and it's not, but it'll be okay for this one trip, and at least it means the fridge stays cold. Everyone's just about packed up. The Murray's a bit bigger down here. All right, well, let's get into the day.
So it wasn't too long, and we were getting back in the vehicles and getting mobile, ready to start the first leg of our trip from the Murray to the ocean. So starting here at Border Cliffs Campground on the Murray, on the South Australian side of the border. So just heading out of the campground now, back towards the main road. And as I mentioned when the drone was up and about, this is the boat rental place up here on the left. That's why there's so many cars in there. People have rented houseboats and what have you and are out on the river. Now just near here is McCabe's Corner, which is the meeting point of Victoria, South Australia and New South Wales, and I was super keen to see if we could get there, but unfortunately after a lot of research I did find out that the only way you can access McCabe's Corner is by boat.
First morning of the trip, got the trip shirts on. We've just left Border Cliffs Campground and just on the bitumen till we turn left and head back towards the border and try and stick on the border as much as we possibly can. Gonna be a cracking day, I think. I got a little bit of a taste of the conditions yesterday, so can't wait to see what it's like as we make our way along the border. I think it's going to be soft and wet and muddy in this northern section.
So the first little bit of bitumen driving, and the last bit of bitumen driving we'll be doing for a while. It's just a couple of Ks heading southwest till we get to Millawa Road, which we turn left on to head east straight back to the border. It's about a 3 kilometre run along Millawa Road back to the border, and that road was in generally good condition. So after my experience yesterday afternoon, I was keen to see what these tracks in this area might be like. As we turn south, turn right, head south on the Vic SA border, on the border fence road. So one of the very first things that we come across to check out
on the trip. This is one of the old original surveying marks that's been rebuilt, Whites Stone Cairn. Was first actually set out here on the 8th of December 1850. and you can see there 2001 when it was reconstructed.
So a little bit of trivia about Whites Stone Cairn. As I just said, that was erected in 1850 by two surveyors, Henry Wade and Edward White, who first surveyed the border. And although it's been rebuilt, the original stone cairn was a pile of rocks and stones about 8 feet high, but it almost never came to be. Talk about commitment to your job. Edward White actually nearly died during his first expedition to this site. He was pushed to the brink by dwindling rations and dehydration, and he ventured alone to the Murray River seeking assistance for the team and was able to return with some supplies, and the borderline was eventually completed. So pretty amazing history, and although it's pretty easy for us to get here in a vehicle today, they didn't have roads back then and they didn't have vehicles, and this corner of the state was pretty remote. Issues with food and water supply were a real issue, and you can see there continuing south the border track, and that's where we're heading. It's a great part of getting out to some of these areas of the country, is exploring and learning a bit more about some of the history that went into forming things like the state boundaries and the work that was done, and it was done hard back in the day. You know, we've got it so easy today compared to back then when they were breaking new ground and literally exploring the country. Heading south here on the border fence road, it's generally in good condition, a little bit undulating at times but largely flat. We've got state forest on the left hand side, or on the Victorian side of the fence, and largely privately owned farmland on the right. So we've just come down here to Lindsay Point Road and crossing over that and continuing south. So as you can see there on the screen, we're about 14 k's along the border fence track. So just getting started, long way to go. We're all pretty excited. And this section of the track was the first section where I started to see some evidence that the track had clearly been soft in recent times with the weather. But it had had adequate time to dry out for us, so we weren't experiencing some of those conditions I'd experienced in a wetter part of the area near Ned's Corner the day before trying to get to camp. So I was pretty pleased about that. We didn't really have the time on this day to be spending time doing recoveries and winching and all that sort of thing. We had a fair bit of ground to cover. Goal for day one was to get down to Nagarka National Park and the start of the one-way section of the border track, with a few side trips along the way. Coming down here to the Sturt Highway, this was really cool. We've got the sign "Welcome to Victoria" on the left and "Welcome to South Australia" on the right. So we're literally in between. We come out in between the two signs. That was pretty cool. And the border track continues straight across the road, just waiting for a break in the traffic there to get across safely. And just to the right down there is actually where the border checkpoint is. So when you go into South Australia on the main roads, they do an actual inspection for fresh fruit and vegetables to make sure that you're not carrying any into the state due to fruit fly. So back on to the border track here and heading south. So we've got the northern end of the Murray Sunset National Park on the left hand side, and largely privately owned property on the right hand side, being South Australia. Again, some indications here and there that the track had at times been soft, but largely dry and in good condition. I didn't have any problems with dust, but some of the other guys mentioned it, not sure why. So we were able to keep a pretty good pace generally along this track. It's your typical old farm track really, a lot of it here, but generally pretty good condition. No big washouts or potholes or anything like that. I don't think it honestly gets driven a whole lot this end of the border track. So it's pretty cool to be out here and sort of exploring some of the lesser driven parts of the border track. Again, this did sneak up on me a little bit there. And you can see off to the left hand side, I don't know whether that's an old alignment or just the Victorian alignment, because you can see that fence on the left, that is the border fence, so we are driving in South Australia. So I don't know if that's just like a parallel Victorian border track on the left hand side there, or what the story is, but we're on this track. And you can see that white coming through on the track. I think that's salt. I don't know for sure, but I think that's salt coming through in the soil. Here we've got no choice but to join the Victorian side for a little while. So we head over there. As you can see, look, not a lot of vegetation, and that's what makes me think that the white coming through on the track is salt, because if it is high salinity soil, it's obviously not going to support much in the way of vegetation. Those little bushes to me look like salt bush, but I have no idea, so somebody tell me if they're salt bush or not. Of course, we could go round or we could go up a hill. What am I doing? I'm going up the hill, aren't I? Of course I'm going up the hill. Been driving on flat ground for a couple of hours at this point, so yeah, any variation is a good thing. And as you can see, the track just disappears off into the distance. Starting to get a few more larger trees here and there, but still nothing like the kind of country that we're used to in the big high country. And this was our first taste just there of the tumbleweeds that were a real thing. You can see here more on the track. I don't know what the story is with these things, whether they grow and then break off. You know, they're weird. They're big round balls of dry dead twigs. I think they'd burn in a heartbeat. So not something, you know, if you were driving a vehicle with a DPF and your vehicle happened to be doing a DPF burn, I don't think you'd want those under there near the exhaust at all. Super dry. And you can see here, they're basically blocking the whole track. And they're pretty sharp too, so you know, I certainly wasn't going to get out and try and move them all, so best I could sort of drove around them and between them, and they were just everywhere. And they look like the kind of thing too that, you know, if you're unlucky, they could maybe catch a sidewall. So did the best we could to sort of steer around them. One of those unique desert hazards we're used to in the high country of fallen timber across the track, but out here in the desert, tumbleweeds. And again, you can see from the condition of this track that I just don't think it gets driven all that often. There are some tyre tracks just there, so somebody's come through, maybe in the last week or so when it was a little bit softer than what it is now. But on the whole, the track doesn't appear super well driven. So just regrouping the convoy and checking my navigation. So we're just passing landmark tank track on the left hand side. So I was keeping an eye out at this point because we're heading to the crater. Now I've never been there before, so I did have to make sure that we took the appropriate left hand turn. Navigating out here is a little bit tricky because some of the landmarks like the crater are not marked on maps. So trying to make sure you navigate correctly. They're not marked on all maps. There's maybe one or two maps that actually mark it, but most of them don't. Almost a little bit of a dune here, but just a bit undulating. It's sandy up on top. And again, track just opens up to another big open section of track, and passing the next landmark, which is Car Warp Road on the left there. So continuing south past that one as well. Fisher Road on the right hand side, which would take you back to sealed roads and bitumen to the west in South Australia there. It was quite an interesting drive through this part of the track, although it seems probably very samey watching the video. The terrain did change, the vegetation changed, and the track kind of did keep you guessing a little bit. And it's just so different to what we're used to driving up in the high country, so it was a welcome change. So again, we're still on the Victorian side. You can see the remnants there of the border fence on the right hand side, and what looks like another alignment of the track on the South Australian side. So that's a pretty common theme along the border here. There's not really just one border track. There's tracks both sides of the border at different times. So you could drive the border track and have a very different experience. As you'll see probably in the next video or so, we take a slightly different route to what we did back in June last year, and find some new challenges before we get to Nugarkat as well. That's probably not going to quite make it into this video. That'll probably be the next video. A little bit of dust coming up off the track, as you can see there. A couple of hills, one off to the left there and one straight ahead, that look like people have taken the opportunity to have a bit of a play on. So a little bit choose your own adventure as to whether you take the left one or the right line. I was sort of already lined up for that right hand one, so elected to take that alignment. Leaving it a little bit late to select my gear there. So still getting used to driving a manual at this point. A few months ago now, and keeping in mind this was filmed back in October 2023. And we've got the benefit here of some footage from Luca's vehicle. So you can see there's the 76 just cresting the hill, and Matt's about to head up in the Troopy, followed by Dan and then Luca.
Again, we've got a split track scenario.
These little obstacles, break the track up just a little bit and break the trip up a bit as well. A little bit of a wombat hole on the top here.
Nice little climb up over there, wasn't it?
Gee, you got some decent articulation in that there, Dan.
Oh, thanks. I've done my stretches.
Yeah, it stretches its legs pretty well.
So Dan moved his Petter's suspension setup from his last proto onto this proto, and it was almost brand new. So yeah, working really well for him. He's been really happy with that. So we're just coming up to Settlement Road here, and this is where we turn left and follow Settlement Road east into the Murray Sunset National Park to head towards the crater. Just driving past the information board there to make sure I was on target. When you got 4 people following you, you don't really want to make a wrong call on navigation. So yeah, a little bit more of a sandy track, but it doesn't take very long at all to open up. Some very open plains through here and a nice hard packed track. And very quickly there's a right hand turn. About 11 kilometres east of the border, off Settlement Road, you turn right and head south to the crater. It's just a few hundred metres. A little bit rougher track here. And parking area's got room for a few vehicles, but not heaps. And the crater, as it's called and known, is actually a small salt lake. Again, this is what makes me think some of that white that we saw coming through the track earlier is actually salt. And the soil out here is pretty high salinity. Given that there's a salt lake out here, seems like a reasonable assumption. Now it's important to note, vehicles need to stay on the road here. It should be a given, but I'm going to say it because there's signs there and it's quite clear that vehicles are supposed to stay on the road, and yet there's evidence of vehicle tracks going into that salt lake because obviously some people feel like they want to try and drive across it or what have you. But yeah, room for a few vehicles here in this parking area, and this is where you need to park your vehicle and then just walk a few metres down to the salt lake there. It's very round salt lake. I haven't been able to find any information about how this is formed or why it's here. It's just eroded and a salt lake's been exposed.
Oh yeah. Oh, she's soft. Especially if you're my weight.
Jeez, you're bogging down already. Ah, you're a big boy.
Yeah, I'm not going any further than that.
Oh, we've got your cabin strap.
Can your winch pull me out though?
Oh, I reckon that will go. It'd be fun watching. Sliding on his back. Like a beach tortoise or something. Yeah, sludgy. Oh yeah.
It needs friends when you get Luca.
That's
That's it.
Yeah, that was 2 steps too far, that.
Yeah, I could feel it done.
Yeah.
I was just waiting for that last.
So quite interesting to see a salt lake out here
You love them.
in basically in the middle of nowhere.
Truck of yours.
So after a short stop over there at the crater, heading out from the crater, so north back to Settlement Road, and turning right, and we're heading to the Shearers Quarters. So Shearers Quarters are an old remnant building from when this was all a pastoral lease, back in about the 1930s through to the mid-1980s, from the Susnet Pastoral Company. So again, just waiting here to make sure all the guys make the turn right onto Settlement Road and none of them accidentally turn left and head back towards the border. So Matt and Paul have made the turn, and Luca and Dan coming along just behind them. So it's a very short run east across here before we get to the next turn. So I believe this is West Settlement Road, yeah, that we're turning right onto. So turning off Settlement Road onto West Settlement Road and heading south. So the Shearers Quarters are south and slightly west of the crater. Becoming the direction that we're coming, it just makes sense to do this loop around and then head back to the border from there. And again, these tracks, roads were all in very good condition. It was a pretty easy drive. So as we head down, just veering right, and this will take us straight into the Shearers Quarters. So the old Shearers Quarters here, you can actually book that as an accommodation to stay through Parks Victoria, and there's a campsite there as well, which is free if you just want to camp on site. But if you want to stay in the building, you can book it on a per room basis or the whole house. Each room's about $115 a night, or the house is $450 a night for up to 10 people if you want to book the whole house out. So that's the Shearers Quarters building you can see now. We're just making our way towards it. Nice piece of history preserved out here. Not sure whether it always looked that nice back when the Shearers used to stay there. And the fact that there are Shearers Quarters out here, you can imagine that they were running sheep out here rather than cattle.
The next turn, Luca.
And the rest of the guys rocked up just behind me there, not too far. All got a park.
See if it's unlocked. I don't know what the story is. Between 1936 and 89. Susnet Pastoral Company. So the campground is down through there. Yeah. Looks like all the doors have code locks on them for people that have actually booked to stay here.
So yeah, as I said earlier, $115 a room.
Cool.
Most of the rooms are 2-bedroom rooms or 2-bed rooms.
Cool old building.
They all have single beds in them.
Sure.
And a couple of them have 3 beds in them.
So yeah, just on the other side of the fence there, fencing in the yard for the Shearers Quarters is where the campground is. And as I said earlier, the campground is free, no booking required. And that's an amenities block there just on the right hand side, providing toilets and I believe showers for the guests staying at the Shearers Quarters. So one of the benefits you get if you do book a night there is you've got a proper toilet and a shower to use as well. Just thought I'd have a look and see what this shed might be used for. Shed just looks like it's used for storage. So modern amenities block here. Again, looks like it is actually only for the use of patrons who have paid to stay here. Complete. And we're surprised to see a defibrillator out here. But given how remote you are, if you need it, it's good that it's there. Probably a safety requirement in parks are booking the accommodation, I guess. So that's it for this video. From here we'll head further down the border track to Nagarkat via Pinaroo in the next video. Guys, thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. We love getting out here and doing this stuff. So like this video if you liked it. If you've got some questions, put them down below in the comments and we will see you in the next video. Don't forget to keep an eye out on Dan's channel. Dan's channel is out there with Dan. He will have some videos of this trip up on his channel in the future as well. Thanks guys. See you in the next video.